Hello. I'd like to talk a little bit about grammar. Grammar is the second part of this course. We'll be talking about issues in advanced grammar, and as the book indicates, what's so advanced about this particular book, about this particular part of the course? And as the book says, and I agree, it's the attitude toward it, not the actual material. So, in the first section, part one, called The Issues, I'd like to talk about each of these 10 issues that they consider to be advanced. Well, they have a high opinion of themselves. Not everything that they mention is particularly advanced, and some of the attitudes that they have are not particularly advanced either. So let's talk about them, for example. And part one, the issues. Let's talk about number one. It says English is a hybrid language, which gives it a bigger vocabulary but multiple grammars. Well, yeah, no. It is not a multiple grammar language. English has only one grammar. It is a grammar that has evolved over 1,000 years, but it has only one grammar. And it says, the text says, at least some of the irregularities and inconsistencies in English are attributable to the different competing grammars which comprise it. Well, at one point. But let's also keep in mind that English is not uniquely filled with irregularities and inconsistencies. This happens to all human languages. So English has hybrid roots. It is a Germanic language in its essence, but it has a large vocabulary that has come to us from French as well as from Latin. But at its core, it remains a Germanic language. But there's only one grammar. Okay, point number two. They say some things are rules, some things are house rules, and some things are somebody's taste being passed off as rules. And some things change category over time. That is to say, some things that was taste become a rule. That happens. Okay, for example, they say Charles and Alicia are my siblings. Well, that is a rule of standard English grammar. That complies with English grammar rules. And if you see a direction somewhere to put a capital T in front of a university name, as they give here, the University of Oklahoma with a capital T in the university, or the Ohio State University, that's a house rule. That has been determined to be in editorial good taste, but is not something universally observed. And there's these items of taste. For example, it says, you can't begin a sentence with and, but, or however. Well, of course you can. There's no rule as to what officially constitutes a sentence. If you're, for example, relaying a dialogue, conversation, we frequently begin a word with because, and we'll complete a sentence with because she said so. Well, yes, if you write that out in dialogue, you'll see she said, comma, open quotation mark, because she said so, period, close quotation mark. So what constitutes an acceptable beginning word is going to be subject to taste. People have tried to impose taste on various things. For example, the very old suggestion that you don't split infinitives. In other words, Captain Kirk was in deep grammatical trouble when he said, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Well, that's a split infinitive, and as Steven Pinker said in his video, that's also perfectly normal English. English does not really have infinitive forms that are splittable. So it's a point that really makes no sense. But Rules really refer to what's considered universally to be grammar. House rules are more editorial decisions and some things that are really matters of taste. Some people try to pawn them off as rules, but we can identify things that are taste fairly easily. Moving on to point number 3. All grammar issues are not created equal. Our text says, for example, knowing the parts of speech is more important than being able to describe and explain nominative absolutes. To which I say amen. We really need to know the parts of speech as they appear used in a sentence. The word rain, R-A-I-N, for example, when we see it in isolation, we think perhaps just the liquid coming from the sky. We might think the noun. But it can also be a verb. It is going to rain today. It rained yesterday. Is it going to rain today? So a word gains its part of speech only through, or typically only through use. A word floating freely in space has no particular part of speech. It only gains meaningfulness as a part of speech when it appears in some sort of context. All right, number 4. All goofs are not created equal. Goofs. There is something about these two authors that that they have a fascination for this word goof rather than say error or mistake or misconception. They use the word goof, which I don't find appealing, but is certainly part of their personal style. And it says, for example, writing, and they put in quotes here, he done ate his dinner, is really bad grammar. A far worse mistake than splitting an infinitive by writing to boldly go. We talked about Captain Kirk. Well, he done ate his dinner is not standard English. No, it is non-prestigious, it is non-standard. In dialectal speech, though, that might be an appropriate and well-constructed sentence, but we are talking about prestigious forms of speech, prestigious American English. That would not be a marker of one's higher educational status. So they call it really bad grammar. It is non-standard grammar. It is non-prestigious speech. But it is grammatical depending on your dialect. There's a difference between grammatical and ungrammatical. So, all goofs are not created equal. That is true. And moving on to point number 5. Remember that many features of English grammar and usage were afterthoughts or midstream corrections. For example, punctuation. Yes, strictly speaking, punctuation and spelling do not constitute grammar. Okay, if you say there are many people and you write T-H-E-I-R, the possessive adjective there belonging to them, as in they live in their house, and you say there are many people and you carelessly write T-H-E-I-R, or something along those lines. For example, they live in their house, and you write T-H-E-R-E. That's not a grammatical error. That's a spelling error. Remember, in our earlier readings and in Dr. Pinker's video, grammar, or language itself, is primarily oral. Writing is derivative of speech, and punctuation is even more removed from actual language. So point number 5, I'm in agreement with. Don't mistake punctuation and spelling as actual grammar. Grammar has to do with the rules of constructing sentences, and typically we do this verbally rather than in writing. All right, number 6. Many of our rules are conventional, not logical. Okay, we do it that way because we have agreed to, not because there's some kind of consistent logic or reason to it. And they use an example of writing. Here's their example. Why do you still need a period, a fourth dot, for a sentence ending in ellipses, ... but not for a sentence ending in abbreviation like DC? Those are mechanics. That's punctuation. Those are stylistics. That really is not grammar. So I'm going to insist on this point that the mechanics, how things appear written, how they appear on paper, truly speaking, are not grammar. Language does not consist primarily of its written form. So, but of course, we communicate largely by writing in this class. So these little points are important to be taken in. Conventions of written language are important, but it is not, strictly speaking, grammar. Okay. Point number 7, many of our rules are not codifiable, cannot be codified. For example, adjective order. We somehow know to write the big white house and not the white big house. But it's not like we have a rule in English about adjective order that we can cling to and teach people and insist they obey. Wrong. We do have an internally organized order of adjectives, but we're never, ever taught them. French has very much the same thing. Now, anyone learning English as a foreign language will learn the correct order in which to put them. We don't have to articulate those. But that says number 7, many of our rules are not codifiable. Well, that may be true, but this is not an example of one of them. So I like their saucy attitude toward many of these things, but some of their conclusions and examples I find a little bit dubious. All right. Point number 8, and remember there are only 10 points here. English has structural versus rhetorical conflicts. For example, the non-exclamatory command, please turn in your books, period. The structure is imperative, that is, telling someone to do something, and so is the intention, and so the correct punctuation is the period. Again, this is written language, okay? These are written conventions. Again, they're important to be observed when we want to be understood and make ourselves clear through writing. But again, it's not truly grammar. And we have the exclamatory rhetorical question, have you lost your mind? With an exclamation point. The structure is interrogative. It looks like it should be a question, but the intention is exclamatory. And so the correct punctuation is the exclamation point. Or is it the question mark? Or is it both? Or is it an interrobang? What? An interrobang. interrobang. It's a combination exclamation point and question mark. You should look it up. Interrobang. I've never seen one actually used, but it does exist. Point number 9. Teachers, textbooks, terms, and treatments have always differed and always will, causing variations, oversimplifications, confusions, frustrations, and disagreements. Amen. This is true. One of the genuine problematic areas of learning about grammar is the competing vocabulary. We just have to agree that some things are going to be called different things by different people, at different times. The textbook refers to some example. Should we call it a helping verb or an auxiliary verb? Slant diagramming or block diagramming? Well, you can relax. We won't be doing any diagramming at all. So the article, the word the, for example, the. Now, is that a separate part of speech, or does that actually fall into the category of adjective? The terms predicate adjective and predicate nominative, as opposed to the term subjective complements. We have lots of competing vocabulary. You should not worry excessively about it. This is one class. We will be using one set of terminology, and we'll manage to clear up any questions you have about the terminology. We will use the book's terminology. That makes the reference very clear. And point number 10, English is alive, in progress, and socioculturally influenced. Absolutely. The book uses some examples. Whatever happened to shall, or even shan't? Are contractions okay, or aren't they? Are they joking? Of course they're okay. A contraction is the natural result of rapid, informal, casual speech. We make contractions all the time. Guess what? So does German. They make contractions all the time. They may not write them, they may not formalize them as much as we do in English, but they certainly exist. Again, it's primarily an oral phenomenon that has been translated onto paper. Of course, contractions are fine. I have the question, is it semicolon with a hyphen between semi and colon? Or is it semicolon, one word? Who cares? Again, that is a question of taste, not of rule. Okay. Is there any hope for the survival of the apostrophe? Well, the apostrophe, again, how do you pronounce an apostrophe? What is the pronunciation of an apostrophe? There is none. There's no sound associated with an apostrophe. We frequently see it followed by an S, but sometimes we see it followed by a T. Doesn't he use apostrophes? But the apostrophe has no sound. Again, this is a question of writing. This is a question of writing, not of grammar. So I don't like the fact that they conflate what I consider mechanics and stylistics with what I consider to be real grammar. But that is a common misconception that people have. They think writing is grammar. No, it's not. Grammar, again, is primarily oral. And there are rules. There absolutely are rules to grammar. It's not a free form. It's not make it up as you go along. But there is no such thing as an apostrophe in the spoken language. So we managed to do quite well without apostrophes for hundreds of years, and then we decided to create one. So will it survive? Will it not survive? Who knows? We seem to know when a possessive, for example, is used, or when a contraction is used. Which is worse? Did everyone bring his book? Did everyone bring his or her book? Did everyone bring their book? Well, the most conservative form of language use would say that everyone goes with his. Did everyone bring his book? But the truth of the matter is, we associate now the word his exclusively with males. The inclusive form is actually a plural. Most people, I would imagine, would say, did everyone bring their book? And that refers to all of the people, whether male or female, or gender fluid for that matter. In fact, a number of people recommend using they as a pronoun of choice when referring to transgender people. I'm no expert in questions of gender and gender identity, but I say it makes good sense to me, and we've been doing it off the record. We've been doing did everyone read their book for a long time. It's not new. It is I. Well, it's correct, grammatically speaking, but who actually says that? I have some ideas about why we say it's me or it's them rather than it is I, it is they. I have some ideas about that. I'll share them with you in the course of these discussions. But in answer to the question, who is it? I would never say it is I. If I do say it is I, I'm being very tongue-in-cheek and overly correct. So there's an interesting question that ends this section. If people do it wrong enough, long enough, shall we all just agree to forget what's actually right? But what's actually right changes over time. Think about that. See you soon.